The text came in while I was halfway through a sandwich at my desk, the kind of Tuesday lunch you barely notice. Turkey, store-brand mustard, too much bread. I was answering emails, watching the little cursor blink on a spreadsheet I didn't want to finish when my phone buzzed. We all voted. Thanksgiving's at your cabin this year. My cousin Emily had texted. Make sure there's enough beds for 26 people. I stared at the message for a good 10 seconds, rereading it like maybe it would change if I blinked hard enough. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply right away. Instead, I just leaned back, staring at my phone like it had personally offended me. Let me back up. I'm Nathan, 34 years old, living in Oregon. I work in finance. Not exciting, I know, but I like the stability. After years of renting in the city, I saved up and bought a cabin 2 years ago. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom tucked into the pines near Mt. Hood, with a wraparound porch and the kind of silence you can't get anywhere near I-5. It's my peace, my retreat. I go there to disconnect, hike, write, sometimes just to drink a cup of coffee in absolute silence without anyone asking me when I'm going to settle down. My extended family. Let's just say they operate like a pack of wolves. There's a weird hierarchy, lots of entitlement, and somehow the loudest voices always win. I'm not especially close with most of them. I have one older brother, Jason, who's fine in small doses, and my parents, who retired and now bounce between Arizona and Florida, depending on which one has better golf weather. But the rest, cousins, uncles, aunts, they're a chaotic mix of freeloaders, passive-aggressives, and self-declared family leaders who never ask, they announce. Emily, the cousin who sent that text, is the unofficial queen bee. She's 39, married to a guy who sells luxury wellness supplements. He's been under FTC investigation twice, and has 3 kids who treat other people's homes like indoor playgrounds. Emily has this way of making everything seem like a group decision, when really, it's just her deciding and looping you in too late to say no. This wasn't the first time she tried something like this, but it was definitely the boldest. I typed back, absolutely not. She responded in under a minute. Too late. We're already driving up. That emoji. The audacity. I felt my jaw tighten as I set my phone down. I was shaking, just slightly, the way you do when you're so stunned by someone's entitlement that you don't even know how to process it. Driving up? To my property? Without asking? A dozen thoughts raced through my head. I hadn't been told about any vote. No one had reached out. I scrolled through the family group chat, one I usually muted, and saw a few vague messages from earlier that week. Emily had floated the idea of a woodsy, cozy Thanksgiving, tagged a few people with "What do you guys think?" and then a flurry of "Love this" from the usual suspects, our Aunt Marilyn, her adult kids, and Jason, who probably just wanted to avoid hosting at his place. No one had even asked me directly, and now she was on her way, with 25 other people. I called her, straight to voicemail. Of course. I texted again, "Do not come to my cabin." I didn't agree to this. She didn't reply, but a few minutes later, I got a ping in the group chat. Emily, yay. So excited for this weekend. Nathan's cabin is going to be perfect. That was it. Not a word to me. Just a public announcement. And everyone started responding. Can't wait. We'll bring extra blankets. Shotgun the guest room. We'll be there Friday morning, Nathan. My stomach sank. It was like I'd been volunteered for something without being in the room. And now everyone was piling on. I typed, I never agreed to host Thanksgiving. Please do not come to my cabin. It is private property. No one responded. Not one person acknowledged it. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Then I saw Emily typing. LOL, don't be dramatic, it's just a few days, and it'll be so fun. Family first. Family first. That was her favorite line. Usually deployed right after she'd taken advantage of someone, dropped her kids off without warning, or forgotten to pay her share of the vacation rental. I felt my heart racing. It wasn't even about Thanksgiving at that point. It was about the blatant disrespect. The way no one thought they even needed my permission. I opened my calendar. It was Tuesday. Thanksgiving was in 2 days. I texted Jason. Me? Did you know about this? Jason. Yeah, they mentioned it. Figured you were cool with it. Me? I never agreed. Jason. Well, it's kinda too late now, isn't it? Too late. I stood up and paced the living room. My laptop buzzed with another meeting invite, but I ignored it. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the image of 26 people pulling up my gravel driveway, hauling coolers and air mattresses and loud toddlers, treating my quiet cabin like a free Airbnb. And somehow, I was the bad guy for not being okay with it. It wasn't just disrespect. It felt like they didn't see me as a person with boundaries. I was just Nathan with the cabin. A resource. A tool to be used. I thought about the last time I saw Emily, at my parents' anniversary party. She'd complained nonstop about how tiring it was to always be the one hosting holidays, how no one ever offered. I remembered her cornering me near the drinks table, joking, "You should really open up that cabin of yours sometime. It's selfish to keep it all to yourself." I'd laughed it off, but now, it felt less like a joke and more like a warning shot. And the worst part? They were really going to do it. Show up. Just barge in, expecting it all to be ready. Because they always got away with it. Because no one had ever told them no. I looked at the time. 2:14 p.m. If I left now, I could get to the cabin by sunset. My hand hovered over the car keys. They wanted drama. They were about to get it. And not the kind they could guilt-trip their way out of. I grabbed my coat, locked up the apartment, and started driving. I had just enough time to make one phone call before I lost signal up in the mountains. And that call would change everything. By the time I pulled off the main road and onto the gravel path leading up to the cabin, the sun was already melting behind the pines. The temperature dropped sharply, and the silence up there was the kind you could feel in your bones. Clean, cold, untouched. It was the kind of quiet that had first drawn me to this place, the kind that felt like a reset button for the soul. But tonight, there was a tight knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat for a second, breathing through the steering wheel. My phone had lost signal 20 minutes ago, and I hadn't heard back from anyone. Not that I expected them to reply, but that just made it worse. It wasn't just the assumption that they could take over my cabin. It was the total indifference to my voice in the matter. I wasn't a host. I was a placeholder. I stepped out, boots crunching against the gravel, and stared up at my place. 2 bedrooms, a fire pit, a small loft I'd turned into a reading nook. I'd spent over a year fixing it up, spending weekends and vacation days patching the roof, staining the deck, replacing the plumbing. It was mine, not a family timeshare, not a vacation rental. Mine. I opened the door, flicked on the lights, and felt that familiar warmth hit me. The kind that made everything slow down. Normally, this place was where I came to not think. To sit by the fire, sip bourbon, and let time pass without consequence. But tonight, that calm was tainted, invaded by the knowledge that I had 48 hours before a parade of chaos arrived to tear it apart. I checked the pantry. A few cans of soup, some boxed pasta, coffee, whiskey. Definitely not stocked for 26 people. I hadn't planned on coming up here at all this week. I was supposed to be with a friend in Portland for a quiet dinner, maybe board games. Nothing big. Certainly not this. My thoughts were interrupted by the low crunch of tires on gravel. My heart dropped. I looked out the front window and saw headlights. It was Jason. He stepped out in a hoodie and jeans, looking completely unbothered, holding a paper coffee cup like he was just casually dropping by. He waved as if this was normal. "Figured you'd come up," he said, walking up the steps. "Knew you wouldn't take that text well." I didn't answer. Just opened the door and let him in. "You seriously didn't know?" I asked. He shrugged. "Emily mentioned it in the chat. Said she had a plan. I figured you'd be cool with it." She never asked me. No one did. He looked around like he was inspecting a hotel room. "Come on, man. You never use this place for holidays. And it's not like you've got plans." She figured it'd be easier to just make the decision. Easier for who? He didn't answer. I watched him walk into the kitchen, open a cabinet, grab a glass like it was his own house. "I'm not hosting Thanksgiving," I said firmly. He gave me that look, half amused, half dismissive. "Well, technically you are. Like, it's already happening. People are on their way. Emily's rented a van. Aunt Marilyn's bringing folding tables. I think Eric's picking up 2 turkeys. Did anyone bring permission?" Jason sighed and leaned against the counter. "Look, you're making this way bigger than it needs to be. It's family. It's a few days. Just let it happen. It's not worth the drama." I stared at him. That sentence. That attitude. Just let it happen. Like I was supposed to roll over for the sake of peace. Like boundaries were optional if it made things easier. He stayed for an hour, tried to talk me down, told me I was too rigid, that I always overthink things, that this was an opportunity to connect with everyone. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said I'd think about it. He left assuming he'd won. But I wasn't thinking about caving. I was thinking about escalation. The next morning, I drove into the nearest town, about 40 minutes down the mountain, and spoke to a locksmith. Explained that I wanted all the exterior locks changed and gave him the address. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. By noon, everything had been swapped out. Then I called the tow company. Hypothetically, I asked, if someone parked on private property without permission, like, say, blocking a driveway, how fast could you be up here to move them? The dispatcher didn't hesitate. We've got 2 drivers covering that route. We'd be there within the hour. Perfect. I picked up 2 thick chains from the hardware store and a heavy-duty padlock. By the time I got back to the cabin, the place felt different. Not just physically, emotionally. Like I'd drawn a line. Like the house knew I was finally defending it. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. I just waited. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket, watching the trees bend slightly in the wind. A hawk screeched somewhere overhead. The air was so clean it hurt to breathe. I thought about what I'd say when they showed up, whether I'd even bother explaining. And then, at around 10 p.m., I got a call. The signal was weak, but it went through. Emily. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then a text. Hey, just wanted to confirm we're coming tomorrow morning. Around 11-ish. Hope you're excited. No question mark. No can we still come? Just blind confidence. A few minutes later, she sent another. We'll need space for 3 cars plus the rental van. Oh, and if you could make sure there's enough coffee and milk for breakfast, that'd be amazing. See you soon. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, the cold creeping into my fingers despite the blanket. My jaw clenched. There it was again. That relentless entitlement. The next morning, the messages picked up. 8:14 a.m. On our way. 8:27 a.m. ETA 10:48. 9:03 a.m. What's the gate code again? There was no gate code. Not anymore. At 9:30 a.m., I left the cabin and looped the thick chain around the bottom of the long driveway entrance, right where the gravel met the main road. I locked it tight and posted a small wooden sign. Private property. No trespassing. Vehicles will be towed. And then I waited. I made coffee. I turned on the fireplace. I sat by the window with a book I didn't read. At exactly 10:48 a.m., I saw the first car. A silver SUV, crawling slowly up the road. Then a white minivan. Then the van. All of them rolled to a confused stop at the chained entrance. I could see them pointing, gesturing. A few car doors opened. I recognized Aunt Marilyn's bright red coat. Someone tried honking. Then my phone rang. It was Emily. This time, I answered. Hey, I said flatly. What the hell is this? She snapped. No emojis now. There's a chain across your driveway. We can't get in. I know. She paused. Well, take it down. We're here. No, you're not. Nathan, this isn't funny. We've got food. Kids. We've been driving for hours. You weren't invited. You said absolutely not like a joke. Come on. No, Emily. I meant it. You didn't ask. You just decided. She scoffed. It's Thanksgiving. You're really going to turn away your whole family over this. You turned yourselves away. I hung up. A minute later, she called again. I didn't answer. Then Jason called. Then Aunt Marilyn. I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb. At 11:20 a.m., a black tow truck rounded the corner, its yellow lights flashing through the trees. And as it slowed to a stop behind the van, that's when everything really started to unravel. The sound of the tow truck's rumbling engine cut through the stillness like an alarm clock in a dream. I stood on the porch, hands tucked into the pockets of my jacket, watching from a distance as the driver stepped out, glanced at the chain across the entrance, then looked toward the knot of angry relatives clustered around the 3 parked vehicles just beyond it. I saw Jason walking toward the driver with his arms raised like he was trying to wave him off. Emily was on her phone, probably frantically calling me again. I didn't check. The driver ignored Jason and turned toward me instead. I gave a single nod. He nodded back and got to work. The next few minutes unfolded like something out of a movie, one of those slow, inevitable scenes where you know everything's about to blow up and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. The driver worked efficiently, like he'd done this 100 times before. He hooked the first car, Jason's, while the others shouted at him from the road. I watched it all unfold with a strange mix of detachment and satisfaction. But that satisfaction was short-lived, because the fallout didn't wait. I was still standing on the porch when my phone buzzed, again and again. I finally turned off Do Not Disturb and let the messages flood in. Jason, what the hell is wrong with you? Emily, I hope you're proud of yourself. The kids are crying. We drove 4 hours. Nathan, you're dead to this family. Aunt Marilyn, your parents will hear about this. And they did. By the time the last car was towed and the dust from the gravel had settled, my mom was calling. My dad followed. Then my uncle. One after the other, a parade of disappointed sighs, scolding tones, and guilt-laced lectures. My mom's voice trembled when she said, "We raised you better than this." I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain. I just said, "You didn't raise me to be a doormat either." That didn't go over well. For the rest of Thanksgiving weekend, I stayed at the cabin. Alone. I chopped wood. I walked the trails behind the property. I sat on the deck and watched the wind move through the trees. The silence that had once comforted me now felt a little heavier. Like something had changed, not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw them. The next week, I returned home to the city and found my inbox full of snide messages and group chat threads I'd been tagged in. Memes about ungrateful cousins, passive-aggressive photos of our family dinner without certain people, and one truly over-the-top post from Emily showing a half-eaten pie with the caption, "Missing a few ingredients, like basic human decency." I wanted to be unaffected. I really did. But it hit me harder than I expected. There was something uniquely painful about being the villain in your own family's story. No matter how justified I felt, it didn't erase the weight of being excluded, misunderstood, talked about behind my back by people who shared my blood. I'd always known I was on the outskirts of the family dynamic. Never the favorite, never the center of attention, but this was different. This was exile. I stopped checking the group chat. Stopped replying to calls. Even Jason, who tried to smooth things over a week later with a week, "You kinda overreacted, but I get it," got radio silence from me. In December, I skipped the family Christmas gathering. I didn't send gifts. I didn't respond to the texts asking if I was coming. I stayed at the cabin, lit a fire, and spent the evening reading and listening to music while snow piled up outside. It was peaceful, but it was also lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from realizing the people who are supposed to care the most about you don't actually see you at all. That winter, something shifted inside me. I started going to the cabin more often, not to escape, but to rebuild. I fixed the wobbly railing on the back deck, repaired the broken window in the loft, added insulation to the basement walls. The work was slow, physical, and satisfying. There was something deeply healing about using my hands, about creating something tangible that didn't depend on anyone's opinion or approval. In January, I found an old notebook in one of the drawers, something I'd bought years ago and never used. I started writing in it. At first, it was just scribbles, frustrations, venting. But over time, it became something more. Observations, reflections, memories, ideas. One night, I wrote a list titled "Things I Never Said," and it turned into 10 pages of everything I'd swallowed over the years just to keep the peace. By February, I was journaling daily. It didn't fix everything, but it helped me understand myself better. Helped me see how long I'd let people push my boundaries because I thought that's what being a good son or good cousin meant. It helped me realize that kindness doesn't mean self-erasure. Around that same time, I started therapy. It was something I'd been meaning to do for years, but never got around to. Now I had a reason, and the space to unpack decades of quiet resentment I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The first few sessions were hard. I found myself defending my family even as I described their behavior. My therapist, Lena, gently challenged me on that. "Why is it your job to absorb the dysfunction?" she asked one day. I didn't have an answer, but I carried the question home with me. Sat with it. Let it echo. Work was steady during all this, but something had changed in how I showed up. I was more focused, more decisive. I wasn't dragging my feet anymore. I stopped people-pleasing my way through meetings. My manager noticed. I got invited to take on a lead role in a new project. Then came a quiet promotion. No party, no big announcement. Just a raise and a new title. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anyone. It felt like mine. In the spring, I bought a set of handmade kitchen knives I'd been eyeing for years. I learned to cook properly, not just bachelor meals, but real, thoughtful food. I hosted one quiet dinner for a friend from work, then another for a couple from my hiking group. They were small, intimate evenings. Nothing like the forced chaos of my childhood Thanksgivings. I started seeing the difference between chosen community and inherited obligation. The more I leaned into that life, the less I missed the old one. But the thing about family is they never really stay gone. In late April, I got a certified letter at my city apartment. The envelope was thick, stiff. It came from a law office I recognized, one that had handled my grandfather's estate years ago. I opened it cautiously, heart thudding like something was about to fall apart all over again. Inside was a notice. Apparently, my great-uncle Alan, an eccentric recluse from the coast, had passed away quietly and left behind a surprisingly complex estate. A piece of land, a small trust, a list of personal requests. And somehow, I was named one of the primary beneficiaries. Me. Not Jason. Not Emily. Me. There was a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, and the letter encouraged me to attend in person. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But I felt something stir in me then. Not just curiosity, but a faint glimmer of possibility. Of leverage. Because here's the thing. Uncle Alan may have been a recluse, but he wasn't blind. He'd shown up to fewer family events than I had. But when he did come, he watched, listened, took mental notes. He once told me, in his usual dry tone, "People tell you who they are, Nathan. You just have to stop interrupting." And now, in death, he might be telling me something. Something the rest of the family wasn't going to like. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the table next to my journal. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for sure. The days of staying quiet, they were over. The law office was quiet when I arrived, the kind of quiet that makes you second guess if you're even supposed to be there. A receptionist greeted me with a flat smile, asked for my name, and led me down a narrow hallway lined with faded paintings of lighthouses and dusty maritime maps. I don't know what I expected, maybe something a little more formal, flashier, but instead, everything about it felt like my great-uncle Alan himself. Understated, deliberate, and utterly unimpressed with modern nonsense. The estate attorney, a man in his early 60s named Walter Kemp, wore a gray three-piece suit and gold wireframe glasses. He looked like someone who'd never once raised his voice and never needed to. When he motioned for me to sit, I noticed there was only one chair across from his desk. Just one. No other family members here? I asked. Walter adjusted a thick manila folder. Per Mr. Reynolds' instructions, today's meeting is with you alone. That sent a jolt through me. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I'd braced myself for a confrontation. Emily sniping at me from the side of the room. Jason trying to smooth things over. Marilyn sighing dramatically in the corner. But it was just me. Walter cleared his throat, opened the folder, and began reading portions of the will. Most of it was legal boilerplate, asset lists, property designations, the kind of dry language that makes your brain fog. But then he paused, turned a page, and glanced at me over his glasses. This section, he said, was handwritten. It overrides the standard inheritance structure, and it's legally binding. Would you like me to read it aloud? I nodded. He began. To my great-nephew Nathan, I leave the seaside house and the trust attached to it, for no reason other than this. You were the only one who ever visited without needing something. You never asked for money, never treated me like a stepping stone. I watched how you carried yourself when the others didn't think I was paying attention. You have more integrity in your silence than they have in their endless noise. Use this property however you see fit. Sell it. Keep it. Burn it down if you must. But know this. I gave it to you because you earned it, not because you were loud enough to demand it. I sat frozen. The words didn't feel real. Walter gave me a moment. Then he continued. The property includes 13.4 acres, the house, and a liquid trust worth $2.3 million. It is all in your name effective immediately. There are no contingencies. It hit me in waves. First the shock, then the realization, and finally the one that caught in my throat. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was validation. A piece of my life had just changed permanently. But the real shift? That was still coming. Because as soon as the rest of the family found out, they were going to implode. And this time, I wasn't going to shield them from the consequences. For the next week, I didn't say a word. I signed the paperwork. I met with a real estate attorney. I toured the property, a weathered, ivy-covered house that overlooked the Pacific, perched on a quiet bluff just outside Cannon Beach. It needed work, but it had good bones, and it radiated that same peaceful energy as the cabin. I moved quietly, methodically. I transferred the trust into a separate LLC under my name. I hired a contractor to begin evaluations. I updated the title records. I followed every paper trail Alan had left and turned them into armor. And then I waited, because I knew what was coming. It started when Jason texted me out of the blue. Jason, hey. Random question. Did you get something from Uncle Alan's estate? I stared at the message. Not, hope you're doing okay, or did you go to the memorial? Just straight to the point. Classic. I replied, yes. 2 minutes later. Jason, what did you get? Me. That's between me and the attorney. The silence that followed was louder than any text could be. 2 days later, Emily emailed me. Not texted, emailed, which told me she was in full professional mode. The same tone she used when she tried to negotiate discounts from Airbnbs she'd already trashed. Hi Nathan. I heard from a few family members that Uncle Alan may have left some things behind. I wanted to kindly ask if you'd be open to sharing any information about the estate. I know he didn't have kids, and it would be really meaningful to the rest of us to have a piece of his legacy. I didn't respond. The next morning, I got another email. Hi again. I just wanted to follow up because a few people are making plans around summer, and we were wondering if Uncle Alan's place might be usable for a family getaway. Maybe something like a memorial celebration? Just brainstorming. Let me know. That emoji. Always the emoji. I forwarded the email to my attorney. Then I drove to the cabin, because I had a plan to finish. You see, owning the seaside house was a gift, but it was also an opportunity. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't just want to cut myself off from the family. I wanted to redefine my role. I wanted to take everything they used to hold over me, the guilt, the obligations, the manipulation, and flip the board completely. But not loudly, not publicly, quietly, deliberately, just like Alan would have. The first step was paperwork. I created a separate trust fund, not for the family, but for future maintenance of both properties, the cabin and the seaside house. I named it the Reynolds Legacy Fund. The catch? It could only be accessed by me or a named successor I appointed in writing. No more open doors. No more shared resources. Second, I rewrote my will. I named 2 of my closest friends as executors. I left nothing to my extended family. Then I went one step further. I scheduled a public listing of the seaside house, not on Airbnb, but as a long-term luxury rental, marketed toward out-of-state executives and filmmakers looking for retreat space. I partnered with a private agency that handled VIP clients. Discreet, high-paying, minimal visibility. Emily wouldn't be able to find the address even if she tried. And just to put a bow on it, I purchased the adjoining lot to the cabin, a piece of forest land that had gone up for sale after a nearby development failed. I had no intention of building on it. I just wanted the buffer. It cost me a chunk of the trust, but it was worth it. Now no one could even build near me without my permission. It was the beginning of my own quiet empire, not built from revenge alone, but from self-respect. From drawing boundaries in concrete and property lines. From turning the chaos they dumped on me into fuel. But I wasn't done, because the next family holiday was around the corner. And I had one final play to make. One that would burn just hot enough to leave a mark, without ever lighting a match. Memorial Day weekend. That's when it happened. The weather was crisp and blue-skied, that perfect coastal spring air that made you want to stand barefoot in the grass with a coffee in hand. I was already at the seaside house that morning, finishing some light landscaping work before the new long-term tenants arrived. A film producer from Seattle had signed a 6-month rental agreement, sight unseen, for nearly $14,000 a month. It covered all the taxes, the renovations, and then some. I was wearing an old flannel, dirt on my hands, music playing low from my truck parked by the garage. It was peaceful, the kind of morning you memorize just in case you need to pull it up later when life gets chaotic again. Then I saw them. 2 cars pulled up along the gravel side road outside the gated drive. One I'd had installed 6 weeks prior. Motion-triggered cameras, stone pillars, automated gate keypad, the whole setup. It was Emily in the lead car, of course. Her husband, Mitch, in tow. Their kids in the back, faces pressed to the window. Jason's SUV rolled in behind them. I recognized it instantly. They didn't see me right away. I stayed by the hedge, behind the small trellis Alan had built decades ago. They got out, stretched, and looked around like tourists stepping into a brochure. Emily pulled out her phone, probably looking for the keypad. while Mitch popped the trunk like he was ready to unload. It hit me then just how confidently they moved, like this was owed to them, like their presence was enough to justify everything. Emily turned toward the gate and called out, "Nathan." I didn't move. She shouted again, "Nathan, come on. The gate's not opening." Jason walked over to the keypad and started poking buttons. After about a minute, I stepped out of the trellis walkway and crossed the grass toward them. Emily lit up. "There you are? You didn't say this place had been updated. It's gorgeous." Jason gave a sheepish wave. "We figured since you hadn't said anything, maybe a family weekend wouldn't be too much to ask." "You figured wrong," I said flatly. They blinked. Emily laughed. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. The kids need to stretch. We brought food. It'll just be the weekend. We'll be gone Monday." "You're not staying here," I said calmly. "You're not even coming in." Jason frowned. "Is this about Thanksgiving again? You're still holding on to that." "This isn't about Thanksgiving," I replied. "It's about everything. And it ends today." Emily folded her arms. "Nathan, it's a family house. Uncle Alan wouldn't have wanted you to just hoard it." I held up my hand. "Uncle Alan left me this house. Specifically, in writing. You all received copies of the will. If you're still confused, I'm happy to forward it again." Emily's lips tightened. "We just assumed you'd do the right thing." I shrugged. "I did. I legally locked this property down and listed it with a private agency. It's currently under lease to a high-profile tenant. You're trespassing, and you're being recorded." Mitch finally spoke. "Are you serious?" Jason stepped forward. "Nate, come on. Just let us in. You can be mad later." That's when the gate keypad made a click, and the intercom buzzed. A voice crackled through. "Hey, is this the Reynolds property? This is Charlie from Vanguard Security. We've got a ping from the perimeter camera, and the owner said to call in." I pressed the button. "This is Nathan. It's my family. They were just leaving." A pause. "Copy that. Want us to come up just in case?" I looked at Emily. She had gone pale. "No need," I replied. "They're already on their way out." I turned back to the group. "You don't belong here. And before you ask, no, you're not getting access to the cabin either. I bought the adjoining land. I fenced the trails. I registered the easements. Everything is locked down. There is no more dropping by. There is no more family getaway." Emily's voice cracked. "You can't just cut everyone off." "You already did that," I said. "When you turned my boundaries into jokes. When you taught your kids that my home was a playground. When you used guilt like a debit card with no limit." Jason tried again. "So what? You're just out." "I'm free," I said. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw it. Realization. Not just that I meant it, but that there was nothing they could do. No argument. No manipulation. No twisting of the family narrative. It was done. I nodded toward the road. "Goodbye, Emily." Her eyes flashed. Anger, confusion, maybe even a flicker of guilt, but she said nothing. She turned, barked at Mitch to grab the kids, and slammed her car door so hard it echoed. Jason lingered a second longer. "This doesn't feel right." I looked him in the eye. "It's not supposed to. That's how growth feels when you've never done it." He opened his mouth, but said nothing. Just turned and walked to his car. The engine started. Gravel crunched. And within 2 minutes, they were gone. No fireworks. No screaming. No threats of lawsuits or social media tantrums. Just gone. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle on the road, breathing in the ocean wind and the smell of pine. My phone buzzed once, an alert from the security system noting that the vehicles had exited the perimeter. I smiled. Later that evening, I opened my laptop and wrote one final email to the extended family group chat. It was short. "Dear family, effective immediately, I'm stepping back from all family gatherings, group decisions, and inherited expectations. My properties are no longer available for use. I won't be replying to messages requesting otherwise. If you reach out, please know that silence is not an invitation, it's a boundary. Wishing you all peace, Nathan." I clicked send, closed the laptop, and poured myself a drink. There were no angry replies, no protests, just silence. And that was how I knew it worked. They didn't just lose access to a house. They lost access to me. And I had finally reclaimed myself from a lifetime of being the easy one, the quiet one, the one who never made waves. Not anymore. Now, the waves were mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make them.